Global Waterworks is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to solve the global water crisis in this generation. Today's video provides the guide to the recently issued Government Accountability Office, or GAO, report. The role of the Government Accountability Office is to conduct independent and objective assessments of the performance of various government agencies against their mandates and responsibilities and report their findings. This GAO report is about harmful algal blooms and hypoxia. And that's important because harmful algal blooms, or HABs, are becoming a national plague on our lakes. The report defines a water body that has succumbed to HABs as having undergone an ecosystem habitat change. And one could lecture hours on this, but in essence, the aquatic ecosystem has been taken over by toxin-producing cyanobacteria. If your water body is a drinking water reservoir, you cannot produce safe drinking water. And the report makes reference to such an event in Salem, Oregon in 2018 that resulted in the need to spend $48 million trying to combat the effects of harmful algal blooms. Harmful algal blooms also makes recreational water unsafe for human activities such as boating, skiing, or swimming, and similarly unsafe for animals as they, livestock, wildlife, pets, or fish, all can succumb to the effects of the toxins produced by cyanobacteria. From a personal perspective, this can lead to decreased property values. On a national and global scale, harmful algal blooms are a threat to global water security and also food security, because food production is so dependent on having safe water for irrigation and for livestock to drink. The background to this report is that in 1998, the Harmful Algal Bloom and Hypoxia Research and Control Act was passed, and that established an interagency working group, or IWG, responsible for managing the risks of harmful algal blooms and hypoxia. To date, the IWG has developed research plans, issued numerous reports, and issued guidance for HAB and hypoxia mitigation and control after they have taken place. But what has not happened is the issuing of any guidance for the prevention of HABs and hypoxia. So if you were to sum up the recommendation that the GAO provides in a single phrase, that phrase would be, start a national HAB prevention program now. The report goes into some detail on the effects of toxins on human and animal health, on the environment more broadly, and the socioeconomic factors such as decreased tourism and recreational value of water bodies, increased expenditure in water treatment infrastructure, and so on. Interestingly, for members of Global Waterworks who are also members of our Prevent and Remediate HABs group, the diagram that the GAO presents to explain the process that leads to HABs and hypoxia will be very familiar, because we've run numerous webinars and talks that have explained exactly how the inflow of nutrients causes algal blooms. The algal blooms die off, the biomass sinks to the bottom, and when it sinks into the sediment, it decomposes and depletes oxygen from the water column. This is hypoxia. Once it's finished decomposing, it becomes a source of nutrients that are released back into the water column to produce new algal blooms. They die off, and then we get perpetual nutrient recycling and algae and HAB production. As the water is progressively deoxygenated, the animal life in the food web, from zooplankton to fish, are unable to exist in deoxygenated water, so they begin to die out and disappear. The GAO report examines responses to HAB and hypoxia events. It notes that mitigation is defined as issuing advisories or posting warning notices notifying the public that the water body is experiencing a HAB event and is therefore toxic and should be avoided. The second type of response discussed is control. And this is essentially trying to kill off the HAB cells. But the GAO makes the point that when you use algicides to kill the HAB cells, this can release toxins which make the situation worse. Also, as previously described, by killing off their biomass and causing it to die off and sink to the bottom and decompose, this further depletes oxygen, causing hypoxia and generating additional nutrients for recycling. So it actually exacerbates the problem. So these control mechanisms in many ways amount to paying money to make the situation worse. Prevention is what the GAO is calling a lot of attention to. The report makes the point that this has to be a holistic, multi-level approach, and it also records the fact that the federal agencies confirm that they do not fully understand the cost and benefits of spending money on mitigation and control as opposed to prevention. And this is something that the report comes back to, noting that there has been a lot of money spent on monitoring and detecting HAB events so that when they occur, mitigation actions can be triggered. But these mitigation actions really are informing the public and publicizing the fact that the program has failed to prevent HAB events. It again makes the point that control responses can actually make the situation worse. And this probably explains why the situation has been getting worse during the 25 years that this program has been in place. And lastly, it draws attention to prevention. This is something that Global Waterworks has been leading the way for well over a year now with our Prevent and Remediate HABs group. And we would invite you to join the group to stay current. You can go to globalwaterworks.org. In May of this year, Professor Wayne Carmichael gave the opening keynote address at the 12th International Conference on Toxic Cyanobacteria in Toledo, Ohio. And the whole thrust of his talk was to make the point that the time has now come to focus on prevention and remediation of freshwater bodies suffering from cyanobacteria, harmful algal blooms, and the days of monitoring, detecting, mitigating, and controlling are over. Global Waterworks also hosted a panel discussion in September this year in partnership with the Michigan Inland Lakes Convention, entitled Protecting Lakes Today for Tomorrow. That discussion focused on the GAO report and how one should go about developing a prevention and remediation program in line with the GAO recommendations. The key finding of the GAO report is that there is no national health and hypoxia program. The report makes note of the fact that in 2016, the Interagency Working Group developed a research program with 5 goals, which are focused on getting a better understanding, further communication, and expanding the research program. But it makes the point that prevention was not included in the goals. So what we are left with is a problem that the GAO highlights of having no national HAB and hypoxia prevention program. The GAO notes that the Interagency Working Group has produced a number of reports, but stresses once again that what is required is a prevention program. The Interagency Working Group makes the point that they don't have a budget to implement a prevention program, and the GAO goes back to basics, making reference to best practice in terms of project and program management, and explains before you can get the budget to implement a program, you need to set a goal. Then you need to clearly define and articulate your program. Only then can you put a budget to the program and seek funding from the federal government for the program. Once that is secured, then you can implement the program that must be accompanied with performance measurement that ensures that the program is being effectively and economically implemented. The GAO came up with 6 recommendations. The first is to develop a national goal. Second, to prevent a national program to prevent hypoxia, and hence the third is to ensure that there is performance measurement of that national HAB and hypoxia prevention program. Also, there needs to be a means of collecting the information necessary to prioritize which water bodies are in most urgent need of these prevention actions. And only when that has been done can the implementation program begin to take place. Lastly, In order to get buy-in from government agencies at the state, local, and tribal levels, there needs to be a much clearer communication of the trade-offs between the costs of mitigation and control and the benefits of prevention. To sum it up, we need a goal, a prevention program with performance management. We need monitoring and forecasting to prioritize which water bodies to implement a program first, and we need clear guidance on benefits of prevention over the costs of mitigation and control. Start a national HAB prevention program now is the message from the GAO. That is one program that Global Waterworks has heeded, and we would urge you to join Global Waterworks. Our next video will focus on how to implement the GAO report recommendations. Look out for that soon. But in the meantime, go to globalwaterworks.org and join us in our mission to solve the global water crisis in this generation.